They came for tea and left China with everything else. For 2 centuries, silver had been the quiet pulse of the Chinese economy. Coin, ingot, and the weight by which debts, taxes, and fortunes were measured. Then in the space of a few decades in the early 1800s, that pulse faltered. Hard silver flowed out of Chinese hands into foreign chests. Opium filled the ports, and the arithmetic of trade began to look like a slow-motion heist. How does a currency stop being a fabric that binds a society together and instead become the seam that tears it apart? To see the mechanics, imagine the tide of trade as a ledger. For centuries, China ran a trade surplus. Tea, porcelain, and silk crossed oceans, and silver returned. The world paid in bullion, and the empire's monetary life ran on ounces and liang. That arrangement changed when Western demand for Chinese goods outstripped what Europe had to sell. Britain found an answer in opium grown under license in India, a product cheap to produce, addictive to consume, and monstrously profitable to traffic. Opium became the commodity that balanced the books the other way, not by bringing silver in, but by carrying value back out in the form of drug payments and payment for imports, reversing a long-standing flow. The human face of this change was not a banker at a desk, but an imperial commissioner on a Canton quay. Lin Zexu, tasked by the Daoguang emperor with stamping out the trade, ordered foreign merchants to surrender their opium and oversaw the public destruction of tons of the drug at Human in 1839. The scene was theatrical and moral, but it provoked a response measured in canons and treaties rather than conscience. Britain, defending what it called its commercial rights, turned enforcement into war. And the court, yes, moral stand became a national humiliation that would force China to rewrite the rules of trade on terms it did not choose. The Treaty of Nanking in 1842 read like a break clause in China's sovereignty. Indemnities paid in silver, ports opened, Hong Kong ceded, and legal protections for foreign merchants written into law. Those indemnities were not symbolic. They were a direct transfer of bullion out of the Qing treasury and into European hands, the same metal the Chinese relied on for tax collection and credit. Open ports meant foreign ships and foreign credit spread across the southern coastline, amplifying trade in goods and in problems. Trade law was remade in 10 paragraphs, and the balance sheet of an empire altered for generations. When a monetary system depends on the physical weight of money, flows matter in ways that paper never taught. The mid-19th century outflow of silver contracted the domestic money supply, squeezed credit, and pushed prices and wages into strange territory. Merchants began to carry fewer silver coins and more IOUs. Local markets that had relied on steady bullion found their ledgers slowing like a clock, losing power. Fiscal strain followed. Tax revenues were harder to collect in real value, and the central government had fewer shillings of silver to pay officials, troops, or relief, turning ordinary governance into a contest over coin. The result was not only economic confusion, but political fragility, a regime increasingly unable to respond to shocks. And if stories like this make you pause, if you want to understand how money has built empires, broken nations, and rewritten history, make sure you're here for the next one. Subscribe to the Finance Empire right now, because every week we uncover the real currency behind power. And once you start seeing the world through that lens, there's no going back. Those shocks did not arrive in isolation. The Opium Wars and the forced opening of treaty ports destabilized social structures already under pressure from population growth and local debt. Rebellions such as the Taiping Uprising exploded into a conflagration that consumed people and silver alike. War meant requisition and indemnities. Indemnities meant more silver leaving China. Leaving silver meant less ability to supply armies or rebuild cities. The fiscal dominoes fell. Local gentry could no longer finance relief. Village economies unraveled, and the state's moneyed backbone grew brittle. Centuries of monetary continuity fractured into a series of emergency fixes and temporary currencies that never replaced the trust of the old silver standard. There is a moral geometry here, not of individual vice alone, but of systems that made profit from ruin. British merchants and East India Company agents played the market. Indian peasants and Chinese addicts felt the cost. The imperial calculus that prioritized balance of payments and market access treated living communities as externalities. For Chinese cities, the damage was intimate. Workshops that paid wages in small silver coins found those coins rarer. Tax collectors returned from provincial rounds with notes instead of silver. Landlords found rents paid in promises. The ledger began to look less like an accounting tool and more like a map of loss, which is to ask, when profit is abstract and tragedy concrete, who counts the cost? Yet this was also an age of paradox. Silver had made China wealthy across centuries. Spanish and American New World mines had poured bullion eastward in an iron logic of demand. That same hard metal could not shield the Qing from a modern militarized global economy. The mismatch was structural. A globalizing West, armed with industrial ships and treaty law, could extract terms faster than a silver-based monetary system could adapt. The very thing that had secured China's integration into global trade now became the wedge by which external power pried open its sovereignty. How do you defend a currency when the rules of commerce are suddenly rewritten on someone else's terms? The echoes of those years are not only historical curiosities. Look around any modern financial crisis, and you will see the same character traits: dependence on a fragile asset, complex cross-border claims, and policy choices that postpone pain until the debt must be paid all at once. Then, as now, short-term profit for faraway traders translated into long-term instability for local economies. The lesson is not merely about regulation or moralizing trade. It is about the architecture of money itself. What anchors trust, who controls it, and who pays when it fails. Which modern anchors are we taking for granted? If the story of opium, silver, and a broken currency teaches one thing, it is this: monetary systems are social contracts disguised as metal. They hold a nation together not through weight alone, but through shared belief. In taxes, in contracts, in the promise that a coin will buy bread tomorrow. When that belief erodes under the pressure of external force and internal fragility, the fall is slow, precise, and human. It is measured in hungry mouths, closed workshops, and the way families move from market to market searching for coin. What remains is the quiet question: could different policy choices, different trade terms, or different diplomatic responses have changed that arc? Or was this collapse written in the ledger from the moment opium left a Bengal field? History, finally, is less a set of facts than a mirror. The tale of China's broken currency is a story about choices, trade policies written in boardrooms and ports, legal frameworks imposed by gunboat and treaty, and the everyday calculations of peasants and merchants who kept the economy moving. It also asks us to look at our own arrangements. What flows today between nations? Who profits quietly? and who pays loudly. If you find that unsettling, you should be. And if you want to follow how money has pulled history like a tide, join us. There are more ledgers that still need reading. If this shifted how you see even a single coin in your pocket, come back. We'll keep tracing the money that built the world, and the human cost when it breaks.